That is what you deserve. Those words still echo in my ears, a sound that refuses to fade. My name is Zenobia Washington. I am 59 years old, and this is the story I kept locked in silence for months, until the silence itself became unbearable. That night, at my son Orion's wedding reception, his new mother-in-law Serafina threw a bowl of piping hot gumbo directly into my face. I felt the searing heat pierce my skin, the spices burning my eyes, and the thick broth dripping down my ivory silk blouse. But what burned me more than the soup was the smile. It was a calm, almost satisfied smile she wore as she looked at me with narrowed eyes, as if she had just done something she had been waiting years to do. That is what you deserve, she repeated with a firm voice, lifting her chin. The banquet hall fell utterly silent. Every guest looked down at their plates. No one moved. No one said a word except for my son Orion. My only child, the boy I raised alone after his father abandoned us, the man to whom I gave everything I had. He sat there at the head table, arms crossed, and said in a deep voice, "She's right, Mama." I felt the floor open up beneath my feet. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even ask why. I simply took the linen napkin from my lap, wiped my burning face with all the dignity I had left, and stood up from my chair without making a sound. I walked toward the double doors with my back straight, even though every part of me was trembling inside. But before I left that building, I did something no one expected. I took my cell phone out of my clutch, dialed a number I had saved weeks ago, and said just 3 words, "It is time." Then I hung up. I closed the door softly behind me. No one followed. No one asked anything. I got into my car, started the engine, and as I drove through the dark streets of Buckhead, back toward my quiet apartment in the West End, a single question spun in my head. How did I get here? There was a time when Orion would hug me and say, "You're my hero, Mama." There was a time when I believed a son's love was forever. There was a time when I trusted. But that night, with my face burning and my heart broken, I understood something I never thought I'd have to learn. Sometimes the people we love the most are the ones who betray us the deepest. And sometimes, silence is the only weapon we have left. What happened after that phone call is something they will never forget. But to understand why I did what I did, I must first tell you how it all started. How a mother who gave everything ended up humiliated in front of a room full of strangers. And how I discovered too late that my son was keeping a secret that would change everything. Sometimes we trust the wrong people too much. 3 years ago, my life was different. Not perfect, but it was mine. I lived in a spacious apartment in the West End of Atlanta with a balcony full of red geraniums and bougainvillea that I watered myself every morning. I had my routine strong brewed coffee at 7, sweet potato pastries from Mr. Henderson's bakery on the corner, and then I would open my small fine tailoring shop on the ground floor. I wasn't rich, but I didn't need to be. After Orion's father left us when my son was barely 5 years old, I learned something many women take decades to understand. That you can sustain an entire life with your own 2 hands, without asking anyone for permission. I sewed wedding gowns, prom dresses, and embroidered blouses for church ladies who wanted to look elegant without shouting about their money. My hands knew every stitch, every hem, and every secret a fabric keeps when you treat it with patience. Orion grew up seeing that. He saw me get up at 5 in the morning to finish an order. He saw me sew until my fingers bled. He saw me cry from exhaustion over the Singer machine that had belonged to my grandmother, and then dry my tears and keep going. "Mama, when I grow up, I'm going to work hard so you can rest," he would tell me with his big, serious eyes while I made him breakfast before school. And I believed him. Orion was always a good boy, responsible and affectionate. He studied without me having to ask and got good grades. On Sundays, he helped me clean the shop and asked about fabrics, colors, and how I knew what dress each client needed. "Because I listened to them, baby," I would tell him. "People always tell you what they need, even if they don't use words." He would nod thoughtfully and then go play basketball with the neighborhood kids. When he turned 18 and went to study business administration at Morehouse College, I felt that every sacrifice had been worth it. My son was going to have what I never had. A career, a degree, a future without back pain or numb fingers. I worked double and triple shifts. I sewed dresses for the weddings of families who would never invite me to their tables, but who paid well. I saved every dollar, denied myself help, and denied myself loans because I wanted Orion to finish college without owing anyone anything. And he did. He graduated with honors and got a job at a top real estate firm. He started earning well, wearing suits that I tailored for him myself, and bringing me flowers every Sunday when he came for lunch. "Thank you, Mama," he would say, kissing my forehead. "Everything I am is because of you." I felt complete. Until he met Clementina. The first time Orion talked to me about her, I noticed something different in his voice. A new emotion. A shine in his eyes I had never seen. "She's special, Mama. Very special." Clementina was the only daughter of a wealthy family from Buckhead. Her father owned a chain of hardware supply stores. Her mother, Serafina, was one of those women who had never worked a day in her life but knew how to give orders like a general. When Orion told me he wanted to introduce me to her, I put on my best dress, the navy blue one with embroidery on the collar that I had made for a distant cousin's wedding. I fixed my hair and put on the pearl earrings that had been my mother's. I wanted to make a good impression. The meeting was at a restaurant in Buckhead that I would never have chosen. Too elegant, too expensive. But Orion insisted. "I want you to get to know each other well, Mama. Clementina is important to me." Clementina arrived in an impeccable white dress and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She was pretty and polite but cold. We talked about unimportant things. The weather, her career in interior design, and the wedding plan she was already imagining, even though she and Orion had only been dating for 6 months. I smiled, nodded, and asked all the right questions. But something in my stomach twisted when she said, "My mother is anxious to meet you, Miss Zenobia. I've told her so much about you." The way she said, Miss Zenobia, sounded strange, as if my name needed a title to exist in her world. Orion took my hand and squeezed it as if telling me, "Everything is going to be fine, Mama." I wanted to believe him because back then I still believed that a son's love was stronger than anything else. I still believed that what we had built together, just the two of us for so many years, was unbreakable. I didn't know yet that some women view other women as enemies from the very first moment. And I didn't know yet that Serafina had already decided, long before meeting me, that I wasn't enough for her family. That afternoon when we left the restaurant, Orion hugged me tight and said, "Clementina adored you, Mama." I smiled, but deep down a small, cold voice whispered something I didn't want to hear. That girl is lying, and Serafina is too. 3 months later they invited me to dinner at their house. That was when everything started to crack. Serafina's house in Buckhead was exactly as I imagined. Massive, cold, and full of things nobody needs. Crystal chandeliers, Persian rugs, oil paintings in gold frames. The furniture looked like it came straight out of a decor magazine, so perfect it was scary to dirty it just by looking. When Orion and I arrived that night, Serafina received us at the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Zenobia, how nice to see you," she said, giving me 2 air kisses without really touching my cheek. Come in, make yourself at home." But I didn't feel at home. I felt like an intruder. Clementina appeared from the staircase, radiant in a pale pink dress that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. She greeted me with the same polite, empty smile as always. "Miss Zenobia, how nice you look." Again that Miss Zenobia, as if my name only existed with that prefix that made me feel old, foreign, from another world. Serafina's husband, Reginald, was a large man with a raspy voice who barely shook my hand before returning to his armchair in front of the television. He didn't say much all night, just grunted occasionally and drank scotch. Orion seemed happy, comfortable, as if that house were more his than our small apartment where he had grown up. That hurt me more than I wanted to admit. Dinner was served by a young housekeeper who went in and out of the kitchen without a sound, eyes downcast. Serafina didn't even look at her when she asked for something. "More water and bring the bread." I tried to smile at the girl when she served me. She gave me a quick, almost grateful look before disappearing again. The conversation during dinner was tense from the start. Serafina talked about her friends at the country club, the vacation they were planning to Hilton Head, and the new SUV Reginald had bought. "Because one can't just drive around in anything, right, Zenobia?" she said with a light laugh. "One has to maintain a certain level." I nodded without knowing what to say. Clementina intervened, touching Orion's arm with a possessive gesture. "Mama, I already told Orion that when we get married, he has to think about a bigger car. That car he has is very modest." Orion laughed uncomfortably. The car is fine, babe. It serves me well. But we're going to have children, aren't we? Clementina insisted with a sugary voice. We need space safety. Besides, my dad can help you with the down payment. I felt a knot in my stomach. My son had bought that car with his own money. I had watched him work hard to get it, and now this girl was talking about it as if it were an embarrassment. I think Orion knows what is best for him, I said with a calm but firm voice. Serafina stared at me for the first time all night. Of course, Zenobia. Orion is a very smart young man. That's why I'm sure he'll make the right decisions for his future. For his new family. The way she said his new family was like a silent slap, as if I no longer formed part of that future. Orion said nothing. He just kept eating with his head down, and I understood something terrible in that moment. My son was letting them push me aside. Serafina kept talking. Now about the wedding. Clementina and I are already looking at churches. The wedding will be at the cathedral, of course. It's where my parents got married, my grandparents, the whole family, and the reception at the St. Regis. Nothing too ostentatious but elegant because things must be done properly, right? I nodded, feeling my throat close up. No one had asked me anything. No one had included me in these plans. It was as if my son's wedding didn't belong to me. And what do you think, Zenobia? Serafina asked suddenly with that fake smile. Do you like the idea? It sounds beautiful, I said, forcing a smile. The important thing is that Orion and Clementina are happy. Exactly, she said, raising her wine glass. The important thing is that they are happy and that they start well. Without burdens. Without burdens. The word hung in the air like poison. Clementina got up to go to the bathroom. Reginald fell asleep in his armchair, and Serafina took that moment to lean toward me, her voice low but clear. Zenobia, you seem like a reasonable woman, so I'm going to be direct with you. Orion is a good boy, but he's accustomed to a certain life, a simple life, and that's fine. But now he is going to be part of our family. And our family has expectations. Expectations. I repeated, feeling the heat rise up my neck. Yes, expectations. Clementina needs stability, a husband who can provide, and Orion needs to focus on his future, not on the past. Her eyes bored into me. The past. I whispered. Don't misunderstand me, Zenobia. I know you've done a lot for your son. That is admirable. But now it is time for him to fly alone, without strings, without emotional dependencies. I felt as if she had stabbed a knife into my chest. I have never been a burden to my son, I said, my voice trembling but firm. Of course not, she said, smiling. But now Orion has other priorities, and I am sure that you, as a good mother, will know how to step aside when necessary. I couldn't respond because at that moment Clementina returned from the bathroom. Orion started smiling again as if nothing had happened, and the housekeeper brought dessert, creme brulee. I didn't taste a bite. When dinner ended, Serafina gave me a small box. A little detail, Zenobia. So you think of us. Inside was a fine china teacup, white with gold rims. Elegant, expensive, and cold. Thank you, I said without looking her in the eyes. In the car on the way back to my apartment, Orion was quiet. So was I. Finally, when we arrived in front of my building, he broke the silence. Did you like Serafina, Mama? I looked at him, searching his eyes for the boy he used to be. The boy who hugged me and called me his hero. But that boy wasn't there anymore. She seems like a strong woman, I said, choosing my words carefully. Yes, he replied, smiling. She's incredible. She and Clementina are very close. It's nice to see that. And us? I wanted to scream. We aren't close anymore. But I said nothing. I just got out of the car, said goodbye with a kiss on the cheek, and walked up the stairs to my empty apartment. That night, while I brewed coffee in my old pot and looked out the window at the city lights, I held the cup Serafina had given me. It was beautiful, perfect. But when I brought it to my lips, I couldn't drink the coffee I had just poured, because that cup wasn't a gift. It was a message. You don't belong in our world. I left it on the table untouched and grabbed my old stoneware mug, the one I had used every morning for years. That one was mine. That one knew the taste of my life. And as I drank my coffee in silence, a question began to grow inside me like a dark weed. How far would this woman go to get me out of my son's life? I didn't know yet, but I would soon find out. The following months were like walking barefoot on broken glass. Every step hurt, but I kept moving forward, smiling, telling myself that everything would be okay, that it was normal, that this is how things are when a son gets married, that I had to learn to let go. But the truth is, they weren't letting me let go. They were ripping me away. Orion started visiting less. Before, he came every Sunday without fail. He'd arrive with pastries, he'd help me move furniture to clean, and he'd stay to eat and tell me all about his week. But after that dinner at Serafina's house, the visits became bi-weekly, then monthly, then sporadic, always with the same excuse. Sorry, Mama. Clementina and I had plans with her family. Sorry, Mama. Serafina invited us to lunch at the club. Sorry, Mama. We have to see about the wedding. Always Clementina. Always Serafina. Always them. I said it was fine, that I understood that he was busy, but inside something was dying little by little. One afternoon, Orion called to tell me that Clementina wanted me to go with them to choose the wedding dress. Really? I asked, my heart jumping in my chest. Yes, Mama, he said. She says, you're an expert in fabrics and wants your opinion. For the first time in weeks I felt hope. Maybe I had been wrong about Clementina. Maybe she did want to include me. Maybe it was all a matter of giving it time. On the day of the appointment, I arrived a half hour early at the boutique, an elegant shop in Buckhead with dresses that cost what I earned in 6 months. Clementina arrived late, accompanied by Serafina and 3 friends who wouldn't stop laughing and taking photos with their phones. Miss Zenobia, Clementina said, kissing my cheek. I'm so glad you came. We need your expert eye. I sat on a velvet sofa while she tried on dress after dress. All beautiful, all expensive, all looking the same to my eyes. The friends applauded, Serafina gave orders to the shop assistant, and I sat there quietly without anyone asking me anything. Until Clementina came out in a French lace dress, strapless with an endless train. What do you think, Miss Zenobia? She asked, twirling in front of the mirror. All eyes turned to me. I took a deep breath and told the truth. It is beautiful, but I think the strapless cut doesn't flatter you as much. You have delicate shoulders. A dress with lace sleeves or thin straps would highlight your figure better. The silence was immediate. The friends stopped smiling. Serafina looked at me with cold eyes, and Clementina let out a nervous laugh. Oh, well, it's just that this type of dress is what's in fashion. Miss Zenobia, I don't know if you are very up to date with trends. Her friends laughed quietly, but loud enough for me to hear. Serafina stood up and put a hand on Clementina's shoulder. My baby, you look spectacular in everything. Don't worry, this dress is perfect. We're taking it. Clementina smiled, relieved. Yes, Mama. You're right, Mama. Clementina had called Serafina Mama, and she still called me Miss Zenobia. I stayed seated on that velvet sofa while they kept talking about veils, headpieces, and designer shoes. No one asked me anything again. When we left the boutique, Orion was waiting for us outside. Clementina ran to him and showed him photos of the dress. Isn't it true? I'm going to look precious, love. You're going to be the most beautiful bride in the world, he said, kissing her. I hung back, clutching my purse, feeling like a shadow. Orion finally saw me. How did it go, Mama? Did you like the dress? It's lovely, I said, forcing a smile. Thank you for coming. I know this is important to Clementina and to you. It's not important to you that I'm here, I wanted to shout, but I just nodded. Of course, baby. That's what I'm here for. Serafina approached, took Orion by the arm and said in a soft voice, Orion, will you join us for lunch? We have to talk about the final wedding details. Of course, Serafina. Mama is coming too, right? Clementina asked, looking at me with that polite, empty smile. Before I could answer, Serafina said, Oh no, my dear. Surely Zenobia is tired. Besides, we are going to talk about very specific organizational things. We don't want to bore her. Orion said nothing. He didn't defend me, didn't insist, didn't say my mother is coming with us. He just said goodbye with a kiss on the cheek and left with them. I stood on the sidewalk watching them walk away. And for the first time I cried in public. Not much, just a few quick tears that I wiped with the back of my hand before anyone saw me. I took the bus back to my apartment. I didn't want to spend money on an Uber. When I got home, I made coffee in my stoneware mug, the same one as always, the one that knew the taste of my life. The china cup Serafina had given me was still on the table, untouched, gathering dust. I looked at it for a long time and a voice inside me whispered, "This isn't going to get better. It's only going to get worse." But I didn't want to listen. I still believed that a son's love was stronger than any external influence. I believed Orion would wake up, realize what was happening, and return to being the boy who hugged me and called me his hero. So I kept going. I kept smiling when they excluded me. I kept saying it's okay, when everything was terribly wrong. I swallowed the pain so as not to be a problem, so as not to be a burden, and so as not to fulfill the prophecy Serafina had planted in my son's mind. Your mother is going to suffocate you if you don't distance yourself. 2 weeks later, Orion invited me to dinner, just the two of us like before. I was so excited. I arrived half an hour early, dressed with care in a burgundy dress I had sewn myself, with delicate embroidery on the collar. I wanted my son to be proud of me. But when he arrived, he wasn't alone. Clementina was with him. "Sorry, Mama," he said. "Clementina wanted to join us. I hope you don't mind." "Of course not," I lied. Throughout dinner, Clementina talked nonstop about the wedding, the honeymoon they were planning in Bora Bora, and the condo her father was going to give them as a wedding gift. "It's in Buckhead, Miss Zenobia. 3 bedrooms, 2 full baths, and a terrace with an incredible view. My dad says it's important to start well." Orion looked happy. I just smiled. When the check came, Orion pulled out his wallet and said something that split my heart in two. "Mama, can you lend me $2,000? I spent a lot this month on wedding stuff, and I'm a little tight." $2,000? I didn't have $2,000 extra dollars. I barely had enough to pay my rent and the shop expenses, but I took out the money I had saved for the electricity bill and emergencies and gave it to him. "Of course, son. Don't worry." "Thanks, Mama. I'll pay you back next month." He never paid me back and I never asked him for it. Because in that moment I understood something terrible. I was no longer his mother. I was his bank, his safety net, his plan B. But I was no longer the most important person in his life. That night, when I returned to my apartment, I sat in front of the window with my coffee, wondering how I had ended up there. How a woman who had given everything, who had sacrificed her youth, her health, her entire life for a son, could end up feeling so invisible. But I still didn't know the truth. I still didn't know that everything that had happened was just the beginning. That Serafina had a plan and that my son, my Orion, my only child, was already part of it. The wedding approached like an inevitable storm, and I kept pretending everything was fine. Orion went weeks without calling. When he did, the conversations were brief, distracted, and filled with uncomfortable silences. "How are you, Mama?" "Fine, son." "And you?" "Fine, fine." "Busy with preparations, you imagine?" "Well, I gotta go. Clementina is calling me." Click. And I was left with the phone in my hand, feeling like something inside me emptied a little more each time. But the worst wasn't the short calls. The worst were the invitations that never arrived. I found out by chance about Orion's bachelor party. A barbecue at Reginald's house with a live band, friends of Clementina's family. No one told me. There was also a rehearsal dinner at an extremely expensive Italian restaurant with the godparents, the close family. No one invited me. When I asked Orion why they hadn't included me, he got uncomfortable. "Oh, Mama. They were small things. Last minute, we didn't want to bother you." "Bother you?" As if my presence were a nuisance. As if I were a problem to be avoided. But I stayed quiet, kept smiling, and kept saying, "Don't worry, son. I understand." Until one afternoon everything changed. It was a Tuesday. I was finishing hemming a gala dress when the doorbell rang. I opened the door and found a young delivery guy with a manila envelope. "Zenobia Washington." "Yes, that's me." I signed, took the envelope, and closed the door. It had no return address, just my name handwritten in black ink. Something in my stomach twisted. I sat in my shop chair, trembling, and opened the envelope. Inside were photographs. Many photographs. First, I didn't understand. They were images of Orion, my son, in different places. Restaurants, a parking lot, a hotel entrance. But he wasn't alone. He was with a woman. And that woman wasn't Clementina. It was Serafina. I felt the floor move beneath my feet. The first photo showed them leaving a restaurant. He had his hand on the small of her back. She was laughing with her head thrown back. The second photo was in a parking lot. Orion was opening the car door for her, their faces too close. The third photo knocked the air out of my lungs. Orion and Serafina entering the St. Regis Hotel together. He had a hand around her waist. She was looking at him with an intimate smile, the smile of a woman who knows a man's body. I dropped the photos. My hands were shaking too much to hold them. My heart was beating so hard I felt it was going to burst. No. This cannot be real. I picked them up with clumsy fingers. There were more. Orion kissing Serafina's cheek. Serafina adjusting Orion's tie. Both of them entering an unfamiliar apartment. And the last one, the one that made me let out a moan I didn't know I had inside. Orion hugging Serafina from behind on a balcony at night. She had her eyes closed, leaning against his chest, like two lovers who had shared something forbidden. I ran to the bathroom and vomited. I threw up everything I had inside until only dry heaves remained and a bitter taste in my mouth. I stayed there, kneeling in front of the toilet, crying uncontrollably. My son, my only son, the boy I raised alone. He was having an affair with his fiancée's mother, with a woman 20 years his senior, with a woman who had humiliated me time and time again. And suddenly everything made sense. That's why Serafina hated me so much. It wasn't because I was simple, or from another world. It was because I was her rival, the true mother, the one who knew Orion from before, the one who could see what she had made of him. And that's why Orion had abandoned me. Not for Clementina, but for Serafina. When I finally managed to get up, I washed my face with cold water and returned to the shop. The photographs were scattered on the chair. I picked them up one by one with hands that no longer trembled. The shock was giving way to something else, something cold, something hard. I put the photos back in the envelope and sat in front of my sewing machine. I thought about all the times Serafina had humiliated me. I thought about the wedding. And I thought about Clementina, that poor girl who had no idea her fiancé was sleeping with her own mother. I thought about myself, the woman who had worked until she bled, the woman who had swallowed insults and scorn. That woman was dead, and in her place stood someone new, someone who was no longer going to stay silent. I took my phone and dialed a number I had saved months ago. A private investigator. Good afternoon. This is Zenobia Washington. I need your services. The voice on the other end was professional, neutral. Tell me how I can help you, Miss Washington. I need more information, more proof. Dates, places, everything you can get on two people. Their names. Orion Washington and Serafina Vance. There was a pause. Any relationship between them? Yes, I said with a voice that no longer trembled. He is my son, and she is his fiancée's mother. I understand. And what do you plan to do with the information, Ms. Washington? I looked out the shop window. I don't know yet, I said. But when I know, I want to be prepared. I'll email you my quote. And Miss Washington? Yes. Some truths hurt more than the lie. Are you sure you want to know? I closed my eyes. I thought of my son, of the boy he had been, of the man he had become. And I said something I never thought I would say. It no longer matters what hurts. I need the truth. I hung up, made myself a coffee in my stoneware mug and waited. I knew the wedding wasn't the end of this story. It was just the beginning. And I was no longer going to be the silent victim. The private investigator's name was Booker Hughes. We met in a discreet coffee shop in Decatur. He brought a thick manila folder full of papers, photographs, and reports. Miss Washington, he said calmly, I found what you asked for, but before I show you, I need you to take a deep breath. I already know what I'm going to see, I said, my hands clasped on the table. No, he replied, looking me in the eyes. Believe me, you don't know. He opened the folder and my world finished breaking. The first photos were similar to the anonymous ones. Orion and Serafina in Midtown, in an apartment that, according to Booker, she had rented specifically for their encounters. This apartment is leased to a shell company, Booker explained. But I traced the payments. They all come from Serafina Vance's personal account. I forced myself to keep looking. Since when? I asked. Booker pointed to a date. The first record I found is from 1.5 years ago. 1.5 years. My son had been sleeping with his fiancée's mother since before he and Clementina got engaged. There's more, Booker said. He showed me bank statements, transfers from Serafina's account to Orion's account, large amounts, $10,000 here, $20,000 there, $50,000 on one occasion. What is this? I whispered. Payments, Booker said. Your son is receiving money from her regularly. The word hung in the air like poison. Payments. My son wasn't just having an affair with that woman. He was letting her keep him. Is there anything else? Yes, Booker continued. And this is the most delicate part. He took out another set of documents. I investigated the finances of Mr. Reginald Vance, Serafina's husband. He is bankrupt. The hardware chain that is supposedly so successful is on the verge of collapse. The house in Buckhead has 3 mortgages. So it's all a lie? I asked. A facade, Booker confirmed. A very well-constructed facade, but it's falling apart, and I think Serafina knows it. That's why she's using her daughter. Using Clementina? How? Booker took out more papers. Clementina inherited a considerable fortune from her maternal grandmother 2 years ago. Close to 4 or 5 million in property and bank accounts, but that money is in a trust that can only be touched under certain conditions. What conditions? That Clementina gets married. Once married, she has full access to that inheritance. And if something were to happen to Clementina while married, the money automatically passes to her spouse. I felt the air escape my lungs. Orion, I whispered. Exactly, Booker said. If Orion marries Clementina and something happens to her, he inherits everything. And considering the relationship he has with Serafina, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Do you think they plan to harm Clementina? I asked, horror rising up my throat. I don't have proof of that, Booker said carefully. But I do have proof that Serafina is a very controlling, very ambitious, and very desperate woman. And your son, Ms. Washington, forgive me for saying it this way. Your son is completely under her control. My son. He was planning to marry an innocent girl to inherit her fortune. There is one last thing, Booker said. He took out a small audio recording device. I managed to place a microphone in the Midtown apartment. It's illegal, I know, but I thought you needed to hear this. He pressed the play button and I heard my son's voice. Orion. What if Clementina finds out? He sounded nervous. Then Serafina's voice, soft, seductive. Serafina. She won't find out, my love. Clementina is foolish. She only sees what she wants to see. Orion. But when we get married, how are we going to continue this? A pause. Then Serafina spoke again with a firm voice. Serafina. Clementina is not going to be a problem for long. You marry her, wait a year, maybe 2, and then things happen. Accidents happen. Orion. Serafina, I can't. Serafina. You can't what? You can't be happy? You can't have the future you deserve? Orion, I love you. I love you like Clementina never will. And when all this is over, we will be together, you and I, with all the money we need without hiding. A silence. And then my son's voice, so low I barely heard it. Orion. Okay, I'll do what you ask. Booker stopped the recording. My son was letting a psychopathic woman put the idea in his head that Clementina had to disappear. What are you going to do, Ms. Washington? Booker asked softly. I looked at the folder. I don't know, I whispered. You can go to the police, Booker suggested. With this information they can stop the wedding. They can investigate Serafina and Orion. What would happen to my son? I asked, tears falling down my cheeks. Orion would go to jail for fraud, for conspiracy, maybe for attempted murder. My son would spend years in prison, and I would be the one who put him there. Think about it, Booker said. And when you decide what to do, call me. I stayed sitting in that coffee shop for hours. I thought about the police. I thought about warning Clementina. But I needed something more than justice. I needed Orion to see, to understand, to feel the weight of what he had done. I needed Serafina to lose everything. And I needed to do it in a way that no one could say I was the villain. I was going to be the mother who let him destroy himself. I took the folder, put it in my purse, and left with my back straight. The wedding was in 2 weeks and I had a plan. A plan that started with a simple acceptance. I was going to go to that wedding. I was going to sit at that table. And when the exact moment arrived, I was going to make a single phone call and everything would crumble. The night of the wedding arrived. I chose a simple navy blue dress I had sewn years ago. I put on my mother's pearl earrings. I wanted to look dignified because I knew this would be the last time Orion would see me as his mother. The ceremony was at the cathedral. I was seated alone in the 5th row. They hadn't even given me a seat in the front. The groom's side was empty. When Orion walked to the altar, I saw the boy he used to be again, and I almost regretted what I was about to do. Almost. But then I saw Serafina. She was sitting in the front row in a champagne-colored dress. As Orion passed, she shot him a look of possession. "You are mine." And Orion responded with a small, complicit, intimate smile just before standing at the altar. I felt bile rise in my throat. Clementina walked in on her father's arm. She looked beautiful, innocent, radiant. She knew nothing. When the priest spoke of vows, Orion took Clementina's hands and said firmly, "Clementina, I promise to love and respect you every day of my life. I promise to be your partner, your support, your refuge. I promise to build a future with you based on truth and trust." I had to bite my lip not to scream, "Liar! Liar! Liar!" The reception was at the St. Regis, a huge, perfect ballroom. They seated me at a table in the back, far from the head table. I was invisible again, but I wasn't there to socialize. I was there to wait for the exact moment. During dinner, I watched Serafina control everything. I saw how she looked at Orion every time Clementina wasn't looking, and I saw how Orion returned those looks. It was disgusting. When dinner ended, the dancing began. The dance with the parents. It was my turn. I got up from my table and walked toward the dance floor. Everyone was watching. Orion extended his hand with a forced smile. "Mama." We danced in silence for a few seconds. "You look beautiful, Mama," he said without looking me in the eyes. "Thank you," I replied. "Are you happy?" "Yes," he replied quickly. "Very happy." "Really, Orion? Are you truly happy?" For the first time all night he looked me in the eyes and I saw something there, guilt, discomfort. "Yes, Mama. Clementina is wonderful. We're going to be very happy together." "And Serafina?" I asked, lowering my voice. "Is she wonderful too?" His body tensed. He stopped dancing for a second. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I think you do know, son." "Mama, this isn't the moment." "When is it going to be the moment, Orion?" "When? After something happens to Clementina? After you inherit her money?" He stopped completely, let go of me, and looked at me with hard eyes. "What did you say?" "I have photographs. I have hotel records. I have bank statements. I have recordings." His face went pale. "Mama, what did that woman do to you? Orion, what did she do to turn you into this?" "You don't understand," he exploded, raising his voice. "You're never going to understand." The music stopped. Everyone was staring. Clementina came running over. "What's happening, Orion?" "Miss Zenobia." Serafina appeared out of nowhere. She stepped between Orion and me. "Zenobia, I think it's better if you leave. Are you making a scene?" "A scene?" I repeated, feeling the rage rise. "I'm making a scene?" "Yes," she said firmly. "This is my daughter's wedding, and I'm not going to allow you to ruin it with your dramas." Clementina looked at us, confused. Orion was paralyzed. The guests murmured louder and louder. And then Serafina did the unforgivable. She turned to the nearest table, grabbed a bowl of piping hot seafood gumbo, walked toward me with firm steps, and threw it directly into my face. I felt the boiling liquid pierce my skin, the spices burning my eyes, the thick broth dripping down my ivory silk blouse. The pain, the humiliation. Everyone screamed. Clementina shrieked. But I didn't move. I just stood there with the soup dripping down my face, looking Serafina straight in the eye. She smiled, that calm, satisfied smile, and said clearly so everyone could hear, "That is what you deserve." The room fell into complete silence. And then Orion, my son, my only son, the boy I had raised alone, crossed his arms and said, "She's right, Mama." Those words were a knife cut deeper than any heat from the gumbo. Clementina was crying. The guests were whispering. Reginald was still asleep in his chair. And me? I just reached for a linen napkin from the nearest table and wiped the burning broth from my face with all the dignity I had left. I walked toward the ballroom exit, my back straight, not running, not crying. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me destroyed. But before I left, I pulled my phone from my clutch, dialed the number I had saved, and said just 3 words, "It is time." I hung up, left the hall and got into my car. As I drove through the dark streets toward my apartment, my face was still stinging and my heart was broken into 1,000 pieces. But I smiled, because the call I had just made wasn't to the police. It was to someone else, someone who was going to change everything and they would never ever forget it. I still ask myself if I did the right thing. What would you have done in my place? I arrived at my apartment with my dress ruined and my soul even more so. But the tears wouldn't come. I had none left. I ripped off the soup-soaked silk and threw it in the trash. I never wanted to see it again. I took a long hot shower, letting the water wash away the sting. When I got out, I put on my old comfortable cotton pajamas, the ones with holes in the elbows that were just mine. I made coffee in my stoneware mug, the same one as always, and sat by the window to wait. I knew the call I had made would have consequences, and they would begin tonight. The person I had called wasn't law enforcement or a lawyer who could lock up my son. It was someone far more powerful. Cornelius Estrada, Clementina's grandfather. He was the man who had placed those millions in a trust for his granddaughter. An 82-year-old widower and retired businessman. One of those rare men who built an empire with his own hands and had no tolerance for lies or betrayal. I had met him months ago at one of the few family gatherings I'd been invited to. I was quiet in my corner, invisible, when Cornelius sat next to me. "You're the boy's mother, right?" he asked with a raspy but kind voice. "Yes, sir. I'm Zenobia." "Zenobia." He tested the name. "Pretty. And what do you do?" "I have a tailoring shop. I make dresses, alterations." "Ah, you work with your hands. I like that. People who work with their hands have soul." We talked for the whole lunch. He told me about starting his hardware chain from a truck, working 14-hour days for 50 years, and how he still missed his late wife every morning. "My daughter Serafina doesn't visit me much," he confessed sadly. "She says I'm old, that I smell old, that my house is full of junk." "I'm sure she loves you very much," I offered kindly. "No," he replied with brutal honesty. "My daughter loves me for my money, but I don't have money anymore. I left it all to my granddaughter Clementina, because she does visit me. She still has a heart." That day he gave me his card. "If you ever need anything, Zenobia, call me. I like people who work with their hands." 3 weeks after receiving the damning evidence, I called him. We met at his old craftsman bungalow in Inman Park. He offered me strong coffee and pastries. "Tell me, Zenobia, what is so urgent?" I showed him everything, the photographs, the bank statements, the recordings, the documents proving the conspiracy. Cornelius listened in silence. His face cycled through pale red and finally purple with rage. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. "My granddaughter is in danger," he finally said, his voice shaking. "Yes, sir." "And your son is part of the plan?" "Yes, sir." "Why are you telling me? Why don't you go to the police?" I had to be honest. Because if I go to the police, my son goes to jail. And as much as he has betrayed me, as much as he has become someone I don't recognize, he is still my son. I can't be the one to put him in prison. Cornelius nodded slowly. "But I can be. I just want Clementina to be safe," I replied. "And I want my son to understand what he has done, to see the consequences, to feel the weight of his decisions. And Serafina, I want her to pay for what she has done, for manipulating my son and planning to harm an innocent girl." Cornelius took my hand, old spotted but still strong. "Zenobia, you are a wise and brave woman. I will help you, but you must promise me something. When everything explodes, and believe me, it is going to explode, you will suffer. Your son is going to hate you. People are going to talk. You are going to be alone." "I am already alone," I said calmly. "No," he corrected. "You still have hope. But when this ends, that hope is going to die. Are you prepared for that?" I thought of the boy he used to be, and the man he had become. "Yes, I am prepared." "Then this is what we will do. You will go to that wedding. You will behave normally, And when the moment comes when they show their true face, you call me, and I will do what I have to do. What will you do first? I am going to get Clementina out of that house tonight. I have lawyers. I have doctors. I will prove my daughter is incapable of caring for her own child, and I will get a protection order. And the money, the trust will be frozen immediately. Neither Clementina nor anyone else will touch that money until a judge decides. And with the proof we have, the judge will decide in my favor. And Orion? Cornelius looked at me sadly. Your son won't go to jail because technically he hasn't committed a crime yet. He's just a fool who let himself be manipulated. But he is going to lose everything. The marriage, the money, the family, the reputation. He is going to be left with nothing. Good, I said firmly. That is exactly what he deserves. That was how we arrived at this moment. Me sitting in my apartment drinking coffee waiting. At 11 p.m. my phone rang. It was Cornelius. It is done, Zenobia. What happened? I arrived at the St. Regis with my lawyers and 2 police cars. I told Clementina I needed to speak with her urgently. When she saw the photographs, when she heard the recordings, she fainted. We had to take her to the hospital. My God, is she okay? Physically, she is fine. But emotionally, that girl is destroyed. It is my daughter's fault and that boy's fault. What about Orion and Serafina? Orion tried to explain, tried to say it was all a lie, but when he saw the proof, he fell silent. He stood there in his groom's suit, surrounded by guests who were whispering and pointing, unable to say a word. And Serafina, that woman? Cornelius's voice was full of contempt. She tried to deny everything. She claimed the photos were edited, the recordings were fake, that it was a conspiracy against her. No one believed her. The scandal was monumental. Guests ran. The hotel staff didn't know what to do. Reginald, that useless man, slept through the whole drama. And now Clementina is under my custody. We are going to annul the marriage. It was the same night, so legally it's as if it never existed. The trust is frozen, and I filed a complaint against Serafina for fraud, extortion, and conspiracy. Is she going to jail? God willing, yes. The lawyers say we have a solid case. Thank you, Cornelius. Thank you for protecting Clementina. No, Zenobia. Thank you for warning me in time. You saved my granddaughter's life. There was a long silence. And your son? He finally asked. Do you want to know about him? I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Tell me. He left the hotel at 2 in the morning. Alone. The guests looked at him with scorn. No one defended him. He left in his car. I don't know where he went. I understand. Zenobia, your son lost everything tonight. How do you feel? How did I feel? Empty, sad, relieved, guilty, avenged, all at the same time. I feel at peace, I finally said, because I did the right thing. Yes, Cornelius replied. You did the right thing. Not many mothers have that strength. We hung up. I sat by the window with my empty stoneware mug. I hadn't sought revenge, I sought justice. Justice for Clementina, who didn't deserve to be used. Justice for me, who didn't deserve to be humiliated. And justice for Orion, who needed to understand that actions have consequences. I hadn't put him in jail, but I had left him with nothing. And maybe, just maybe, when he hit rock bottom, he would remember who I was and what he had been before Serafina's poison corrupted him. That night I slept deeply for the first time in months. I had done what I had to do. Not with rage, but with the cold clarity of a woman who understands that sometimes the greatest love you can give someone is to let them face the consequences of their own decisions. The days after the wedding were strange and silent. I heard nothing from Orion for a week. He didn't call. He didn't write. I didn't look for him either. I knew he needed time to process the magnitude of what he had lost, and I needed time to heal. Cornelius called me every couple of days with updates. Clementina was in intensive emotional therapy, deep in depression after discovering the man she married was having an affair with her own mother. It's too big a betrayal, Cornelius told me. She will heal with time. The scandal spread like wildfire. A video of the confrontation at the St. Regis went viral. People commented, speculated. Some called Orion a victim of manipulation. Others called him an opportunist. The truth was somewhere in the middle. He was a weak man who made terrible decisions because he didn't have the courage to say no. By the second week, Cornelius told me the DA accepted the complaint against Serafina. She could face between 8 and 15 years, he said. The woman who humiliated me, who corrupted my son, who planned to harm her own daughter was going to pay. And Reginald? He's a drunk who's been disconnected for years. He knew nothing of the plan, but he lost everything. His wife is going to jail, his daughter hates him, and his business is bankrupt. He lost the house and is living in a rented room on a miserable pension. I felt no pity. Sometimes complicity is as guilty as the action. In the third week, Orion finally sought me out. He arrived at my apartment at 8 p.m. without warning. When I opened the door, I barely recognized him. He was unshaven, with deep circles under his eyes, his clothes wrinkled. He looked destroyed. "Mama," he said with a broken voice. I stood in the doorway. "What do you want, Orion? I need to talk to you. We have nothing to talk about. Please, Mama, just let me in." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to slam the door in his face, but another part, the part that had carried that boy in my arms, couldn't say no. I let him in. He sat on the shop chair where I had received the first photographs, where everything had begun to break. "Do you want coffee?" I asked out of habit. "No, thanks." I sat across from him and waited. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "I'm sorry, Mama." "What are you sorry for?" "Everything. Everything I did to you." "And Clementina? Are you sorry for her too?" He nodded, tears running down his cheeks. "Yes, especially for her. I didn't want to hurt her." "But you did," I interrupted, my voice cold. "You planned to marry her to steal her inheritance." I heard the recording, Orion. "I know what you said. It wasn't me talking. It was Serafina. She manipulated me, Mama. She made me believe that I was worth nothing without her. That you had raised me to be mediocre, that I deserved more." Every word was a dagger. "And you believed her?" "Yes," he whispered. "I believed her." "Why, Orion? Why did you believe her and not me?" "Because she gave me what you never could. Money, right?" "Well, yes, but not only that. She gave me attention. She made me feel important. She made me feel like I was special." "I made you feel special too." "No, Mama. You made me feel guilty. Every time I visited you, I saw your small apartment, your old clothes, your tired hands, and I felt guilty for having more than you. Serafina never made me feel guilty. Serafina told me I deserved everything I had." I sat in silence, processing his words. I understood something terrible. My son hadn't left me out of malice. He had left me because he couldn't stand remembering where he came from. I was the mirror of his humble origins, everything he wanted to forget. Serafina had offered him a way out, a way to become someone who didn't have a seamstress mother reminding him of his roots. "You know what's the saddest thing about all this, Orion?" I finally said. "I never made you feel guilty. You just felt guilty because you knew deep down that you had abandoned me. I know I'm a mess. I know, Mama, and I am so sorry. Where have you been these weeks?" "Cheap hotels, spending the little I had left. I lost my job. No one wants to hire me. My name is all over social media. And the house Reginald was going to give us? It was a lie. The hardware stores are bankrupt. The Buckhead house is foreclosed. There was no money, only debt. And Serafina is in jail, awaiting trial." "Good," I said without remorse. Orion looked at me with red eyes. "Don't you feel anything for her?" "Should I? That woman destroyed her own daughter. She corrupted you. She humiliated me. Why should I feel anything for her? Because I loved her." "No, Orion. You didn't love Serafina. You were obsessed with what she represented, power, money, status. But that is not love." We sat in silence for a long time. Finally, he asked what he had come to ask. "Can I stay here, Mama, just for a few days? Until I find a job?" "No," I said firmly. "Mama, please. I have nowhere to go. I have no money. I have no—" "You should have thought about that before." "Mama, I'm your son." "Yes," I interrupted. "You are my son, and that is why I tell you no. Because if I let you stay here, if I rescue you now, you are never going to learn. You are never going to understand the weight of your decisions." Then what do you want me to do? Sleep on the street. I want you to do what I did when your father abandoned us. I want you to get up, work and rebuild your life with your own hands, without shortcuts, without manipulations, without depending on anyone but yourself. I can't, Mama. I'm not as strong as you. Then learn to be. Orion stood up. He looked at me with a mix of pain, rage and desperation. Someday you're going to forgive me, Mama. Maybe, I interrupted. But that day is not today nor tomorrow. Maybe in years or maybe never. That depends on you, on who you decide to be from now on. If you change, if you become someone better, then maybe we can talk again. Not as mother and son, but as two people who need to learn to know each other again. Orion nodded, tears streaming down his face. He walked to the door, opened it and turned one last time. I love you, Mama. I know, I replied. But love without respect means nothing. He left. I closed the door and stood there, listening to his footsteps fade. I didn't cry. I had done the right thing, the hardest thing, the most painful thing, but the right thing. I hadn't sought vengeance. I had sought silent justice. 2 years have passed since that night. 2 years since I watched my son walk out of my apartment with nothing. 2 years since I decided that the greatest love I could give him was to let him face the music. My life hasn't changed in spectacular ways. I still live in my apartment, work in my shop, and drink coffee from my old stoneware mug. But I no longer feel invisible. I no longer feel small. A person's worth is not in their money or neighborhood. It is in their capacity to remain standing when everything crumbles, and to choose the right thing even if it hurts. Cornelius became a dear friend. He visits me every 2 weeks. Clementina asked about you last week. He told me recently. She's better. Much better. She finished therapy, started studying psychology, and says she wants to help other women who have gone through what she did. I'm so glad to hear that. She wants to meet you, Zenobia. Says she wants to thank you for saving her. I didn't save her. I just did what I had to do. That is exactly what saving someone means, Cornelius replied with a sad smile. Clementina visited me one October afternoon. She was no longer the fragile, scared girl I'd seen at the wedding. Now there was something stronger, more mature in her. She sat in the shop chair, the one Orion had sat in, and I made her coffee. I want to thank you for everything you did, she said, tears in her eyes. You saved my life. I held her hand. I did it because it was right. Because you are a good girl who didn't deserve what they were doing to you. My mother. Her voice broke. My own mother planned. I know, child. I know. She cried for a long time. I stroked her hair. When she calmed down, she asked, how did you get over it? How did you manage to keep going after what happened with Orion? It wasn't easy. There were nights I wanted to call him, rescue him, tell him to come home. But I knew if I did, he would never learn. He would never change. Has he changed? I don't know, I admitted. 6 months ago, he wrote me a letter. He told me he got a job in a factory, is living in a small room, and is going to therapy. He's trying to be better. Did you reply? No, not yet. I need to be sure he is changing for him, not for me. When Clementina left, she hugged me tight and whispered, thank you for being the mother my own mother never was. That night I cried. Not from sadness but from something complex. I had lost a son, but in a way I had gained a daughter. 3 months ago I received news of Serafina. Cornelius called. She was sentenced. 12 years in prison without possibility of early release. How is she? Destroyed. No one visits her. She's completely alone. I felt relief but also a strange sadness. I also remember the boy Orion had been. I wondered if he could go back to being that boy, or if that part of him had died forever. Orion's second letter arrived 2 weeks ago. It was longer, more honest, more vulnerable. He wrote about attending a support group, learning to live with the guilt, and saving money to pay me back everything he owed. I don't expect you to forgive me, Mama, he wrote. I don't expect us to go back to what we were. I only hope that someday when you see me on the street, you don't cross to the other side to avoid me. I want you to know something I never told you enough. Thank you. Thank you for having the courage to let me fall when I needed it most. Because now I understand that you didn't let me fall out of hate. You let me fall out of love. I love you, Mama. I have always loved you, even if my actions said otherwise. Your son Orion. I read that letter 5 times and cried through every reading. I put it in the drawer next to his first baby photo and his 3rd grade note that said, Mama, you are my hero. I haven't replied to him yet, but I think I will soon. Forgiveness is not forgetting what happened. Forgiveness is remembering the pain and still choosing to move forward without carrying that weight in your heart. I know I wasn't a perfect mother, but the truth is none of us is. We all make mistakes. What defines us is what we do after. Do we learn? Do we grow? Do we get up? I am proud of my story because I survived. I didn't break. And I learned that true strength is not in never falling. It is in getting up every single time you fall. A mother's love has no limits. But now I know it shouldn't have conditions that allow abuse either. Love must be firm, honest, and brave. Love must tell the truth even if it hurts.